Hello everyone, I'm out at Cedar City War Memorials today, and this is the World War II War Memorial, and I wanted to tell you a little bit about World War II and also share with you this awesome place. So you can see the world back behind there, and then you can see all of these granite walls back over there and on this side, and those are all the people who served in World War II from Cedar City. So there were 71,000 people from Utah who actually served in World War II. And Utah became a huge, almost epicenter for the United States government to come and train in many different ways. So especially their pilots. Their pilots actually trained in northern Utah in the Hill Air Force Base. They trained there, and the person who actually dropped the atomic bomb, he trained here in Utah. So that was one huge thing that Utah brought to the war effort, was that we had all of this open land for the pilots to train. We also again had the mining industry, so because we had all of these different mines, we had coal mines and we had iron mines and copper mines, that we could provide supplies for the war effort, like munitions and supplies for guns, things like that, and we could make them as well. So that was another thing for the war effort. Also in Utah, especially when these men went off to fight, they a lot of the jobs were obviously left behind, and so women started joining the workforce in droves because they needed to fill those jobs that were left behind by the men who had left for war. So that was really helpful in helping us get out of the Great Depression. Most people would consider World War II, especially in Utah, helping us get out of the Great Depression, with the government now providing jobs for the war effort, but also now women filling those jobs. They weren't just gone. Women were filling these jobs as well. Something else that is really important specific to Utah, as I talked about actually in World War I, was Victory Gardens. They were starting to ration their food again to make sure that there was not a food shortage, that they could send food to the soldiers. They would have that, so they actually started Victory Gardens up again, which was very helpful. Something else that also it was helpful with people from New Mexico, Arizona, and Utah was the Navajo Code Talkers. So it's interesting because these Navajo Code Talkers, because of their language, the Germans and Italians and Russians, and well, when Russia was on the other side and not with the Allies with us, they couldn't figure out, and Japanese as well, they couldn't figure out their language. They didn't realize that it was a real language, or they couldn't break it, and is the only unbreakable code that has ever been in terms of dealing with war. So these Navajo people, there was almost 400, there was over 350, I think there was almost 400 of them who actually were a part of this. So basically they created a code using the Navajo language, and they would send these codes to people who needed them. So that their superiors would give them a message in English, and then they would send it, they would translate it into Navajo, and they would use, they would actually use animals as military terms, and then they would send that they're in Navajo to the next person where it needed to go, and then it was retranslated back into English, and then it was given to the United States military. But when it was intercepted by the Germans and by the Italians, they could not figure out this code. And so it was actually really, really helpful. Now, what's interesting, I feel like, about this is they were so helpful in winning the war. And they didn't win it on their own. There were so many people involved in this. But what's interesting to me is that prior to this, if you remember us talking about the boarding schools, and that the American people wanted the Native American people, including the Navajos, to assimilate into America, and they didn't want them speaking their language in these boarding schools. They didn't want these kids to know their own language. So that's what's kind of interesting, is before this they wanted them to get rid of their culture, and now it is helping save lives in World War II. They want them to use this. So that's really interesting and really cool that they were able to still do that. So the Navajo Code Talkers, hugely successful from Utah, Arizona, and New Mexico in helping win the war and save lives in the war. Utah obviously was very helpful with the mining industry, which it always has been, right? Again, in World War I, it was helpful with the mining industry. But it was also helpful in that it brought us out of the Great Depression, because we had more of these permanent jobs that were going on. and women were going more into the workforce. And then also we had these great open spaces for these pilots to train, which was awesome and super helpful. So those are the major things about World War II that Utah contributed with. And of course, again, Victory Gardens, those were also helpful for people to be able to have food, and for us to be able to send more food overseas. So, but this is really kind of a cool place to come and see, and you can see all of these names. I think that is just amazing. And I really think this is just it's a really cool globe, because it encompassed the world, right? During this war, it encompassed really the world. So come and check it out.